Leader.
Mama Angus didn't raise her boy to speculate.
Hey gang, what's up? Have you heard of Trump rage? Well, former MP Charlie Angus, he was with the NDP party, keep the oil in the ground, tree hugging type of guy from Northern Ontario. Well, he has Trump rage and he unleashes here on a lot of things, especially Donald Trump. Let's take a look and a listen. Charlie Angus is a man on fire. Let's take a look. Oh my goodness, this is wild.
Oh yeah.
Good morning. I am here in the press gallery of the Parliament of Canada, the heart of our democratic engagement with people. And this morning I offer my deep concern, solidarity, and prayers with the people of California who are out in the streets unarmed, defending the rule of law against illegal kidnapping and deportation, and they're being faced down by the military might of the United States Marines. We're not talking about creeping fascism here. This is full-on police state tyranny from the gangster president Donald Trump. Wow. And this is the man who will soon be crossing our border to attend the G7 meetings in Canada. I have received hundreds of messages of concern and outrage from Canadians that a convicted felon, sexual predator, and a man who has threatened our nation's sovereignty is being allowed into our country. I understand the Prime Minister Carney's reluctance to escalate the situation with the MAGA president. But we have to stop kidding ourselves, and we have to be very honest about what we are being asked to engage with. Donald Trump poses a clear threat to American democracy, to Canadian sovereignty, and to the international rule of law. And this morning, I will lay out a straightforward indictment of Donald Trump's threats, not just to his own people and not just to Canada, but to the international rule of law. Since November 2024, Donald Trump has made over 100 attacks on Canada. And yet when it comes to the war criminal Vladimir Putin, Trump has said almost nothing except to defend, to explain, to write off the crimes of the Putin regime. He is doing this at the clear expense of the American people and the Western allies. He continually promotes Vladimir Putin while attacking President Zelensky, the people of Ukraine, and the people of Canada. We remember that when Vladimir Putin launched his murderous invasion of Ukraine, Donald Trump declared Mr. Putin a savvy genius. And he said that the arbitrary seizure of Ukrainian territory was, quote, wonderful. Trump refuses to denounce the murderous bombing of the cities of Ukraine, and he has falsely accused President Zelensky of having started the war. Trump has put the security of our European allies at risk to the benefit of Russia. He continually as well undermines American domestic security. When Russia launched cyber attacks on the United States, Trump downplayed the threat and put the blame on the, quote, lamestream media. Russia interfered with the United States election, which may have helped Trump get elected in 2016, and yet Trump has blocked investigations into the foreign interference. And yet Donald Trump has been more than willing to vilify Canadians. Earlier this year, Pete Navarro pushed to have Canada kicked out of the Five Eyes intelligence network. Canada plays a key role in the Five Eyes, helping keep Americans safe. It's a job that we do as an ally and a neighbor. But MAGA has turned Canada into their #1 enemy, with recent bogus claims from Kash Patel about terrorists from Canada flooding over the border. So let's compare those falsehoods with how Trump deals with the threats from Russia. This past March, the United States ordered the U.S. Cyber Command to suspend operations against Russia. The United States shut down efforts to counter Russian sabotage. Attorney General Pam Bondi blocked the FBI's Foreign Interference Task Force, which leaves the United States wide open to secret influence campaigns by Russia, China, and other dark actors. You got to ask yourself, is Donald Trump loyal to the people of the United States who elected him, or to Vladimir Putin's undermining of the international rule of law? Just this past February, President Trump said he wanted Russia reinstated into the G7, and he falsely blamed Canada for having Russia been kicked out. Russia was expelled from the G8 then for illegally invading Ukrainian territory. In February, Trump opposed a European resolution condemning Moscow's actions against Ukraine. In opposing this vote on defending Ukraine's territorial sovereignty, the United States voted with the gangster regimes of Russia, Belarus, and North Korea. Trump rejected Canada's proposal on tackling Russian shadow fleet of oil tankers that are being used to undermine sanctions. In February, the United States vetoed Canada's proposal to establish a task force to monitor sanction breaches by Russia. The Attorney General has disbanded the program aimed at seizing assets of Russian oligarchs. Now, we know that Donald Trump, who is a convicted criminal, has been more than willing to aid and abet international war criminals. Vladimir Putin, like Benjamin Netanyahu, has bombed hospitals. Vladimir Putin, like Netanyahu, has targeted schools. Trump has said nothing about this. Vladimir Putin has kidnapped over 19,000 Ukrainian children, and in March 2023, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin over the unlawful deportation and transfer of children. And yet, as soon as he came to power, Donald Trump cut funding for the Yale program that was tracking Ukrainian children who'd been kidnapped from their families and forced into Russia. In March 2025, Russian lawmaker Andrei Kartapolov called for the United States to stop sharing Ukraine with intelligence. And following that, Donald Trump obediently cut intelligence sharing that led to a series of Russian strikes in Ukrainian cities. And Trump has defended Putin's attacks on Ukrainian civilians. And he says that Putin is easier to deal with than the people of Ukraine. Let's just talk for a minute about the tariff war. Trump has launched massive tariffs against Canada, Mexico, and Europe, his key allies. He has claimed that his tariff war in Canada will force us as a nation to break and beg to be his vassal state. On top of that, he's targeted 150 countries, including countries as small as Madagascar, Rwanda, St. Helena, Liechtenstein, Senegal. And yet he's not imposed any sanctions or tariffs on Russia. He falsely claims there is no trade with Russia. In fact, there's $3.5 billion in Russian trade that has been exempted from tariffs, and Trump says he wants more trade with Russia. He says this as he attacks Canada's manufacturing, steel, agricultural, entertainment industries. Canada can no longer view the United States as an ally. We know that Donald Trump doesn't believe in liberal democracy. He doesn't believe in the rule of law. Canada is an open and inclusive society. Little wonder that Donald Trump has denounced our nation as one of the nastiest countries he's ever had to deal with. And we'd be fools to pretend that his threat to, quote, get rid of the border by using economic force has somehow abated. We can't kid ourselves about the threat that's being posed by Donald Trump. Prime Minister Mark Carney is not inviting our nearest neighbor and friendly ally to join us in the G7. Prime Minister Carney is not inviting the leader of the free world to Canada. He is welcoming in Vladimir Putin's sock puppet, who will have the best seat in the key negotiations with the G6. Donald Trump will be there as we attempt to negotiate a deal in a dark new world. And we know that Donald Trump is there to undermine us at every step of the way. Canada must be focused on containing this clear and present danger to our nation and the rule of law. We must stand with the people of Ukraine and our allies who believe in the democratic order. The Prime Minister must state boldly that he will stand up against any attempts to interfere in Canada and to undermine through academia or through American corporations that are in Canada any DEI measures that are in Canada, because Canada is a nation of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is what makes Canada a light in this new dark age of gangster regimes. And Trump is the gangster. I urge Canadians to keep the boycott strong. I urge the Prime Minister to work with us and work with our allies and send a very clear message that we will not support in any way the rise of an authoritarian regime south of the border that is using the military against its own people. Canada at this point is holding the line, but we must remain true, north, strong, and free. Thank you.
So are you calling for Prime Minister Carney to disinvite President Trump to the G7 meeting then?
I think it's a really fair question. This man is threatening us. Now, as again I said, I recognize that Prime Minister Carney probably doesn't want to escalate the situation with Donald Trump, but I think we need to be sending a message somehow that we will contain this threat, and we need to make sure that we're not giving Donald Trump all access in our negotiations at the G7 because he does not have our interests at heart.
So do you think the government's current actions with more defense spending and the One Canada economy bill are enough to, I guess, sort of pad us from the threat of America?
I think we are partly on the road. I think that there have been some good initiatives. We have to become independent militarily. We have to become much more independent economically. We do need our premiers to step up. Some of them are not stepping up at this time. But I think we have to also not kid ourselves about the threat that Donald Trump is posing to us. The idea from his MAGA ambassador, Pete Hoekstra, well, listen, you know, Americans got hurt too. Pete Hoekstra was in the Netherlands undermining the people of the Netherlands and supporting extremist parties while being ambassador there. We have to contain this threat, just like we would contain a threat from Vladimir Putin. We have to stop pretending that Donald Trump is just being Trump.
What does contain look like, though?
Well, this is a very fluid situation we're dealing with. And so I recognize that the Prime Minister is going to have to be more careful than me, but we need to be really framing this discussion as a threat from an authoritarian regime that's on the rise. When Governor Newsom talks about this being an open threat to democracy at this moment, our nearest neighbor is no longer a democratic nation. So Canada has to be very super vigilant, and now is not the time to drop our guard.
You said some premiers aren't stepping up. Which premiers and, yeah, what does that look like?
Well, clearly we see with Danielle Smith and Premier Moe breaking the boycott, inviting American alcohol back into the stores. I mean, what's that about? Just after, again, Pete Hoekstra said that the tariffs are going to remain in place. They are now inviting American product back onto the shelf. The boycott has been an unprecedented success. The boycott of Canadian products has forced a 90-some% drop in American wine exports. America is dependent on Canadian wine exports. It has affected Kentucky through the boycott. The boycott on travel is threatening $12 billion in trade. The reason the boycott is so important is because it keeps pressure at the state level and state governors to actually put pressure on. If we drop our guard, there is no way that they will ever drop those tariffs. So Danielle Smith needs to stop threatening to break up our country, and she needs to start standing with the rest of Canada and saying we're going to hold the line, because Canadian jobs are Canadian jobs, whether they're in Alberta or whether they're in Oshawa and Windsor.
Governor Newsom said there's no working with Trump, there's only working for Trump. How do you view Carney's relationship with Trump so far?
One of the reasons I decided to come here is I think when we hear from the governor of California that Donald Trump is such a threat that there is no working with him, we have to remind ourselves in Canada, we can't become complacent and think, oh, the threat's over. There is no working with an authoritarian. Trump has stated he believes that the world is under three, great powers, Russia, China, and the United States. That means he sees Canada as a vassal state. So I recognize that Prime Minister Carney is going to have to be super careful, but we have to recognize that we're not working with him. We're not going to cut deals. Whatever promises he makes today, he will break tomorrow. We have to recognize that this is now a clear and present danger on our border.
Are you planning on joining any protests in Calgary or traveling to Calgary at all ahead of the G7 or during the G7?
I can't get to Calgary before the G7. I know that we are having many protests just as well supporting the American allies, the grassroots resistance on June 14th. So, but what I've seen, and I've been touring the country, is this is a unique moment for Canada because what's leading the resistance are ordinary people. I get this very clearly wherever I go in Canada. Ordinary people understand that we are under a threat that we haven't seen since the 1930s. Ordinary Canadians need to hear from their leaders that they share those concerns, and this is why I'm here today.
How do you feel about Modi and the Crown Prince being invited to the G7?
I think the decision to invite Mr. Modi is very concerning. I think one of the things that we're realizing now is that we are certainly in the age of, as Gramsci would say, monsters and monster regimes. And Canada is now having to find its way in the midst of the monsters. Modi has, certainly undermined Canada. Some of his actions have been very concerning. We have now Donald Trump there. I'm not going to second guess the Prime Minister at this point, even though I spent my whole life in opposition. I want to say, though, that we have to be very wary of who we are making deals with. But I would certainly encourage Canada to focus on Europe, focus on Asia, focus on allies that we can trust and share our values.
I haven't heard you speak to this yet since the election, maybe you have, but can I just get your general sense of your thoughts on where the current state of the NDP is right now? It's brutal results in the last election, and I'm just wondering, what do you feel about the kind of soul-searching the party needs to do and where it's at?
The election was a disaster, unmitigated disaster for the New Democratic Party. What I felt, and I've been heavily touring across the country during the campaign, and I'm at rallies and meetings all the time. I feel two things. One is that people feel that the party lost touch by becoming very much a leader-focused group, as opposed to the New Democratic Party of Canada. But I also have a sense that people are really understand the need to have a three-party system in Canada, and we need to rebuild the New Democratic Party. So when you have bills like C2 come in, there needs to be a progressive left-wing party at the committee hearings, bringing witnesses, making sure that this is going to be in the nation's interests. And right now we've lost that ability. So I think that this issue of renewal of the party is super important, but we have to understand that if we are a social democratic party, we have to be a democratic party from the grassroots. We have to re-engage with people. We lost touch, and we have to be honest about that.
Are you interested in
So the conversation.
Can I have a question, please?
So the conversation that you're having isn't that different than a lot of people are having on the ground, but there's a big disconnect, as you know, at the national political level. So, saying that, is that something that you would support in somebody coming forward to lead the New Democratic Party, or that something that would be a little more challenging to the status quo in terms of how Trump is approached, things like that? And also, I know you've been asked this before, but and you've declined. But have you fully ruled out getting back involved in politics, or maybe running even for the leadership?
I will not be running for the leadership. I felt ever since Donald Trump came to power that I need to focus on Canada, and I will continue to focus full out. I'm working more than full-time than I've ever worked before on this threat. I do believe that there is a disconnect in Canada that, I think one of the problems and one of the realities is, and I'm just trying to be fair here, is that, we know what we know, and our comms people know what they know, and our pollsters know what they know, and they're good at what they know, and our talking heads are good at what they know, but we're dealing in completely uncharted territory. We're dealing with the rise of authoritarianism. None of us were there back in the 1930s, so we don't have anything to compare to. I think we have not really framed the threat as clearly as we need to. And I think that puts a danger to our political leadership to be more worried on just the day-to-day rather than the big picture. We need a very strong New Democratic Party, and we need a strong renewal. So I'm interested in seeing who comes forward.
We haven't seen a response yet from the federal government in terms of Trump doubling tariffs on steel and aluminum. Have you been talking to anyone behind the scenes regarding this issue, or what do you think the government needs to do in response to the doubling of steel and aluminum tariffs?
I think maybe the best thing that Prime Minister Trudeau ever did was when he said that we would go dollar for dollar in response, because we saw some of our other allies not step up, and I think it emboldened Trump, and we saw that Trump did back off. The threats to steel and aluminum are not just to us. They're a serious threat to American industry. They're a threat to the auto sector. We are an integrated economy in terms of trade. And I feel that not going back full on is not in the best interests of Canada. I think it's better that we take this fight on and force a response rather than suffer a slow bleed off of jobs, which is what we're going to be stuck with if we don't respond very firmly.
What do you think of Bill C5, specifically the second part that deals with getting big projects built? As you probably know, it's sort of, once it's listed, it's conditionally approved, and then the regulatory processes play out with a focus on how a project can be built as opposed to whether it can. Yeah, what do you think about that? You spent so long as natural resources critic.
Well, you know, they have said that Canada is 3 monopolies in a trench coat. And I certainly hope that those 3 giant monopolies don't get their way again. If it is in the national interest, then let's make sure that it's in the national interest and not just in the interests of pushing forward. Again, we've spent $34 billion on the TMX pipeline. We're never going to see that money again. We're subsidizing every barrel of bitumen going down the TMX pipeline by about 50 cents on the barrel. Well, if there was an economic case, why aren't they paying the full freight? So the idea that we're going to fast-track projects when we see that Doug Ford is now exempting projects from environmental review and causing major resistance in Indigenous communities. This is not how it's done. We have many projects ready to go right now that have been gone through the process of good consultation and have gone through the process of a fair process. So the government can't undermine that, because what it does is it creates conflict, and when you create conflict, you don't get projects built.
And are you concerned at all about the quite broad powers that this legislation would give the government with regards to approving projects? You know, there's some clauses in there about being able to delete or amend portions of specific acts as it relates to a given project. Thoughts on that?
Well, the reason that we have the legislation in the first place is because we've seen so many disasters. I live in Cobalt, Ontario. My backyard is an abandoned mine site. Down the street from me, there's lakes that are full of arsenic and cadmium that'll be there contaminated for hundreds of years. We put rules in so that we do it right. In Canada, certainly in the mining sector, we have some of the highest standards in the world, and we do it right. I don't see why we suddenly now have to say we're not going to do it right. The government has the power already on working with the provinces in terms of environmental assessment, about making sure that projects sometimes don't have to go through 2 or 3 different overviews to make things happen. But I'll tell you, when you have First Nation buy-in, projects move forward. So I would be focused on making sure we have First Nation buy-in by having good projects, and those nation-building projects will happen.
Have you spoken to Singh since he lost his seat?
I haven't spoken to Jagmeet Singh since the election, no.
Who would you like to see as the next NDP leader?
Mama Angus didn't raise her boy to speculate.
What qualities do they need to have then?
Well, number one, you got to be able to win. I think number 2 is recognizing, you know, the strength of the social democratic movement was it was a social democratic movement. Number 1, I would kill Zoom. Everything I see with the party is on Zoom. Nothing against Zoom. We had to do it during COVID. But, you know, we used to be a party that was really rooted in at the riding level. The ridings, you know, the big debates on who were going to be delegates at convention, who were going to regional forums. We used to hold pub nights. We used to hold bean dinners. God, we'd have bean dinners and we'd all go, right? Like, I mean, it was a hassle and you never made any money, but it was about bringing people in and making them feel like they belonged. We became a party that was very focused on TikTok likes. I'm sure that helps, but TikTok didn't get us elected. We became focused on data. Data is very important, but to be a social democratic movement, you need to go back to reinvigorating the riding association. So I want a leader that is less worried about big ideas. We got boxes of big ideas as New Democrats. We got big ideas going back to the 1960s we're still waiting to enact. What we need is to make a party, again, that people feel like they belong to. And
announced an interim leader, and then clearly 3 of the MPs, at least that spoke publicly, didn't even know about that. What's going on there? That's a breakdown, isn't it, of what's happening in the party?
I don't know what happened there. I mean, obviously the ship hit the rocks in a dramatic way. I think Don Davies is to me an obvious choice for an interim leader. He's a great negotiator. The reason we have national dental care is because of Don Davies. He made that happen. I think that there was some kind of disconnect, but I think that the important thing is for my colleagues is they got to have each other's back, because this is going to be a rough 4 years. But and I came out of the election feeling pretty burned at what happened, but I've been out on the ground and I'm meeting lots of people who are actually about rebuilding. I mean, that's the thing about us New Democrats. We're like goddamn dandelions. It's like once we're on your lawn, you can't seem to get rid of us. So the dandelions are coming up again and saying, okay, let's do something. So, I think we're going to get through these. We will get through this period, yes.
Why didn't you speak to Singh once he lost his seat?
I wasn't running. I wasn't part of the election, so, I talked to some of my former colleagues. I didn't talk to some of the others. Some of them I missed. Some of them I didn't have their phones. I probably dropped the ball too. I think we were all in a little bit of shock. So, thank you.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what to think. Let's just use the word wild. He's got Trump rage for sure. Aaron, Canadian Looney, like, share, subscribe. Catch you in the next video. Thank you for watching this one. Come and check out one of our live shows. It's a blast. That's it. We'll see you next time, gang. We're out.